Cool, let's kick off. I want to get a bit of a sense of who we've got in the audience here, because one of the things I was trying to figure out is what kind of people will be coming to this workshop. So, who are the people in the room that come from UX, product, design background? Okay, cool. And who are the people in the room that come from crypto economics, token engineering, game theory, mechanism design? All right, cool. Different question. Who is new to blockchain technology, so maybe kind of a year down the rabbit hole or less? Okay, and who has been in this space for like more than 3 to 4 years? Ah, awesome, so we've got a really good variety. So, mechanism design meets UX. Naz and I came up with some practices that kind of blended these two disciplines together, and today we want to share what we've created with all of you and actually see kind of how does that start to play out when people actually use them. What we're really trying to do is use kind of the best of both worlds, and today we'll do a little bit of an intro into what is UX, what is mechanism design, and then we'll get straight into doing some simulations with the classic mechanism design example of cutting a piece of real cake, as well as you get the opportunity, although we'll just need to time box it, for you to actually try this same technique but with your own concepts. And why is this important? Well, we think with blockchain technology, we now have this incredible ability to design how humans interact at an incredible scale. And I think that means that we need to get really good at designing the rules of the game. And not only designing the rules of the game, but get in the habit of simulating and seeing how they play out, because I think it's important to know, is this the kind of game that we wanted? Is this the future that we wanted to create? And actually incorporate that into the way we're designing these games and these rules in the first place. So that's where it comes from. A bit about us, so we've got Naz over here, and my name is Gendry, and we're co-founders of a company called The Flight Plan. And the piece of the puzzle in this ecosystem that we're really trying to solve is around the utility of blockchain technology and also user adoption. So we work with the Web3 UX global community, but this photo up here is with us, we're from Australia in Melbourne, of the Australian community, really playing with and trying to tackle and pioneer some of the challenges we have about user adoption in Web3 and blockchain technology. And we've built a platform that it creates dApp instances that are as easy to edit as Wix, but based on the Web3 UX patterns, so the things that are different. Okay, so to kick off, I'm going to talk a bit about mechanism design and UX, but first I'm going to talk about UX. So, what is UX? And I look to breakfast as a useful way for me to describe these concepts. So UX is not deconstructed data. UX is not product. So product with the accessories, the breakfast, the milk, the containers that it goes in, the consideration around pricing. It's certainly not the user interface, our friendly spoon over here, but it is the experience, so the functional and emotional aspects of really like experiencing and eating that breakfast. And it's things like the juxtaposition of the cold milk against the crunchy cereal for people who are cereal connoisseurs. But it's also things like, how does cereal as a breakfast fit in your life? You know, so it's not perishable. You can have it in the cupboard for quite a long time, so you don't really have to plan ahead. And it's things like, who are the kinds of people that are interested and love cereal as opposed to maybe eggs on toast? So for more of a functional definition, it's really understanding that user's experience when they interact with your product, a focus on emotional functional details, and we really try and move away from abstractions and especially from assumptions because we don't assume that we know how the user is going to behave when they start interacting with our product. For the UX people in the room, you would have seen the double diamond before. So this is probably one of the most popular kind of approaches and techniques for thinking about UX. And we go from diverging to converging on a really kind of tight, time-boxed manner. And this allows us to really iterate through as we learn more about users. So breaking this down a bit, we go from research. So this is where we might interview a user, we might find out, what's happening in their life, what are some of the problems that we want to tackle and we want to solve, what are some of the emotions behind it. Then we refactor those into insights. So we use tools like user journeys or personas or user flows to actually articulate those insights. And that gives us a basis for starting to ideate around what could solutions be to some of the problems in this user's life. But we don't go and build a fully blown solution. We aim for what is the essence of the solution that we want to capture, and we build as low a fidelity prototype as possible. And then using that prototype, that gives us something to actually put in front of the user and test with them, so we can validate whether we're accurate or inaccurate, or capture some more learnings about whether they actually like what we think. And this is really important because we keep going through this cycle, and we do a lot of this before we actually build out our solutions further and further. Okay, so we're going to unpack a few of these techniques from the double diamond today in this workshop, and we're going to touch on them lightly, but the first one I'll talk about is personas. So personas give us a way to really bring to life the characters and the people that we're designing for. And in this one you can see we've got Alice here, and we tend to have, what is their role underneath. And then we have a quote here, and we have a quote because that kind of personifies in that user's language, what is their motivation, what is their goal. And so if you're conducting a user interview, you'll tend to grab, you'll listen and you'll be writing down specific quotes, and then you'll find a quote that really brings to life that person. And then at the bottom here we've got, she's currently a no-coiner, but wants to learn more about crypto and blockchain. So it's good to understand where are they at in terms of their understanding around your product, as well as what is their motivation, what do they want to do next. So personas give us a little bit of space to understand and get insight, and that gives us an idea about, okay, what do we want to design for? So we move very quickly onto a mock-up or a prototype. So for today, you're going to come up with a mock-up of a mechanism design. But probably what's more familiar, if you're working with people building digital experiences today or user interfaces, you might see that people use things like InVision or paper prototypes that actually show the screen design of what it might look like, and they're things that we can start to put in front of users. So that's what this step is all about. And that gives us something to then go on to simulation and user testing. So today we're going to do a lot of simulation, which is really acting out those different designs. And what we look for are, what are the highs and lows in that experience? And we want to amplify the highs, and then we want to maybe come up with different solutions or iterate and improve on the lows, as well as when you start to test with a few users, you get to see what are the patterns, what does everyone do that's quite similar, but also what are the edge cases and extremes that we might be interested as well in designing for.
So now that we've touched briefly on UX, let's enter into the world of mechanism design. How we like to describe mechanism design is an approach to designing ecosystems and people interaction towards a desired outcome. Ultimately, what it aims to create is compatibility between the goals of individual actors and the system that they're in. Now, mechanism design is also a discipline or a topic under the study of economics. And there's this very famous researcher by the name of Stanley Reiter who came up with this model of describing the mechanism design problem space. Now, for the purpose of today, we'll abstract away from the specific details of the mathematical equations and the formulas, and keep the discussion at a level where we're able to keep the discussion at a level where we're able to bring in aspects of UX and see how it will help us to understand mechanism design. So just to give a very high-level overview of what mechanism design means formally, we have a space that's signified by the box on your left, which signifies the different type of actors with private information about the system and their specific preferences. And as they participate in the system, it will result in a bunch of outcomes that appears as the box on your right. So ultimately, as a system designer who's undertaking the problem of mechanism design, what you're doing is you're identifying one specific outcome that you want from the system and introducing form of game mechanics, which are rules around the strategies and actions that the actors can take, and also how the final outcome is determined. Now, how do we approach mechanism design in practice? It might feel like there's a lot to take in at one point in time, but what we like to do is to go step by step, and then eventually layer on the complexities as we go along. So starting with the system, we start by identifying the specific goal of the system and being very specific about what the mechanism that we're introducing is trying to achieve. Once we've done that, we will look at the actors and start to understand their individual motivations. After that is done, we're then ready to move on to the game mechanics side of things. So this is where you go in and you set a basic set of rules around how the actors will interact and do some simulation to see what the outcome is. Eventually, you come up with a few different options and you do a few rounds of simulations. Once that is done, you pick one of the design options that you've gone with, and you choose to proceed with that. So once we've picked the specific design option that we want to go with, now we're ready to start to introduce incentive design, where we can explore aspects of introducing rewards, privileges, incentives, and also penalties in order to assist or direct the actors towards the specific outcome that you've defined right at the start. Lastly, we'll take a look at how we can introduce the use of tokens in order to just wrap things up.
So most people haven't heard of mechanism design, but a lot of people have heard of game theory. And so it's worth going into a little bit about game theory just to unpack that. So game theory allows us to simulate and mathematically analyze and understand different mechanism designs. So what you can see here is an example of a payoff matrix. And so what we're doing is we've got the different players of the game, or the different actors, and we're actually able to see, based on what kinds of strategies they might take, what might be the payoff. And once we actually start to understand and get a view of how the game plays out, we can start to understand what are the dominant strategies, or what's the kind of equilibrium that's reached in the game. So you might have heard the term a zero-sum game. So there's all these different types of games. One of the things that we haven't done in this worksheet is figured out yet how to add in some of that mathematical side of game theory yet. So we actually lean on UX for more of the simulation to kind of bring out some of the more functional and emotional aspects of how it feels to play out the simulation. So in this technique, we're really blending together what we see as the best of mechanism design in terms of economic and mathematical approach to designing how humans interact and towards that goal of the game, and the best of UX practices that help us empathize and understand the people that are actually interacting with the game, as well as the low fidelity practices of iterating really quick. And we found that a lot of these concepts are really abstract to understand, and there's no better way to understand it than to take it kind of out of the theory and use the real example of slicing a piece of cake. So we have 3 actors in this example of slicing a piece of cake. We have Alice and Bob, who are both cake connoisseurs. They love cake and want to get as much as they can. And then we've got Trent, the dad, who is thinking to himself, how do I divide this cake between Alice and Bob fairly? In terms of the system goal, that's to equally distribute the cake between Bob and Alice. And at the center of everything, of course, is the cake. And this is the demo we're going to go through, and Naz is starting to hand out some pre-filled templates. We found that it's good to kind of do a warm-up of this activity before we start with your own concepts. Okay, so this is what the worksheets look like, and the things that I've just gone through are part of like what we call about the system. So this is the actors, the goal, what's at the center, as well as the action. So we've got 2 actions in here. One is cutting the cake, and the other is allocating the slices. And then in the next section, in section 2, we've actually got 3 different mechanism design options that we've pre-filled. So the first one is Dad decides. So Dad cuts the cake and he allocates the slices. The second one is one child decides. So we've chosen Alice can be the one who cuts the cake and chooses her slice. And then we've got more of a peer-to-peer cake sharing model where Alice cuts the cake and Bob chooses the slice. So the first thing we need to do is we're going to work in groups of, well, we said 3, but there's a lot more people in here than 3. So there'll be 3 people on the table that are actually acting out the roles of Alice, Bob, and Trent. And then the other people will be observers writing out the insights in the sheet. So if you want to participate, make sure you're on a table, or if you want to see it play out, make sure you're near a table. All right, cool. And Naz is handing out the very special materials for this exercise. Does every table have a worksheet? Does any table not have a worksheet? All right, cool. I'm going to assume you all have a worksheet. Now, before we get into this, I'm going to teach you guys a facilitation technique. Otherwise, I'm never going to get your attention back once you start talking. So, has anyone done this one before? No, they haven't. Okay, so when I put my hand up in the air, if you see me, you put your hand up as well, but you stop talking. Awesome. So that kind of creates a movement, and it means I don't have to yell over you, which would be amazing. So we're going to step through each of the different parts of this, and we're going to do it with the cake, and then we'll do it with your own concept. Okay, so the first fun step is we're going to start with this mechanism design option and simulating the Dad cutting the cake and allocating the slices. So here are your instructions on your table. So we're going to play out the first mechanism design, and each person, so choose on your table who's going to act as Alice, Bob, or Trent. And then if you're not acting out as one of those people, then I want you to use the pencil and capture the insights in that section 3 and really look at what are the highs and lows, as well as did it meet the system goal of equally distributing the cake. If you have any questions, put up your hand and Naz and I will come around. We'll probably give you about 5 to 10 minutes to play this one out. Go for it. Anyone has questions? So, what are you going to do? And allocate the slices. Yeah, that's exactly what so. And then we're going to see how we have to do that. Actual cake. Yeah. Yes, actual cake. If anyone has questions, just put your hand up and we'll come over. Gotta really cut the cake, guys. Alright, so that was the first mechanism design. And if you still need help, Naz and I will come around for the next one, but we'll get the next mechanism designs kicked off in terms of simulation. So, moving down to the next parts of the worksheet, we're going to focus in on a few other different mechanism designs. And we have, Naz has new cake to hand out, so you can get 2 slices of cake for these 2 other simulations. And you're going to play out, again, both of these different mechanism designs. And so Trent probably gets to maybe relax a little bit this time. He had a lot of pressure on him in the first one. And then for the people who are observing, really capture the insights, think about what are the differences in the different mechanism designs, as well as, you know, which one's starting to kind of meet the goal more than the others. Now, for people who want something a little bit more advanced, of course we've got that delicious chocolate cake, which is more of a fungible one, but we've also got some more kind of non-fungible examples. But, yeah, you see what I did there. But they're limited in supply. You guys have already got them. I'll let Naz hand them out. All right, cool. Everyone know what to do? Put up your hand if you're still not sure. Okay, cool. Let's do the next one. Someone asked me, do we keep the same roles? Yes, keep the same roles. The Trent stays as the Trent, Alice stays as Alice, Bob stays as Bob. Just put your hands up if you've finished the 3 simulations. Alright, we're going to give 2 more minutes and then we'll move on to the next bit. Conversations. Awesome. Okay. So now we're going to make it more complex, yeah? Okay, so we're going to move on to incentive design. So that's section 4 on your worksheets. And so this is where we get to think about, was there anything left over in maybe our favorite mechanism design that we could use rewards, incentives, penalties, or privileges to help with. And this is where you might want to consider, I mean, each of these simulations or mechanism designs, we've kind of treated quite independently, but maybe this cake sharing example is not just a one-off, yeah? And there's more of a metagame happening here. So that's something to think about. So rewards. Rewards are, after doing something good, you get a reward. Or privileges, they could be special powers or authority that's granted in the system. Incentives, so declared up front in exchange for some action or outcome. And then penalties, so after doing something bad, you're penalised. Yes?
What's the difference between rewards and incentives?
So, there's probably people in the room that can be more specific about than me, but I tend to feel that incentives feel a bit more like bounties, so you kind of know that you're going to get it in advance, whereas a reward is something that you get after the fact. Yeah, so subtle kind of difference. So maybe play with that, be interested in what people think. And then the other thing that we can do is also add the use of tokens. So if we start thinking about some examples, they could be earned as rewards, they could be taken away as a penalty, they could be staked to access special privileges, they could be secured for future transfer to incentivize, they could be exchangeable for utility today or in the future. But there's all sorts of things I think you can do when you start to add tokens to the mix as well. So, of course, the next activity is think about which of those mechanism designs do you really want to improve upon. So maybe choose just one of them and then start to think about how you might do that incentive design and or add tokens. And I'll give you about 5 or so minutes to do that. Cool? Cool, so I hope people are having a little bit of fun. It's supposed to be a little bit of fun.
The cake's really good.
The cake's good, yes. The cake is good. We will tell you where the cake comes from too. Okay. So that's section 4. Now, obviously you could unpack this and spend a lot of time on it. We really want to see, how you go kind of getting the gist of it. Alright, so the next section we're going to move on to is section 5. So you've chosen a mechanism design, you've checked whether it meets a system goal, you know the different actors, you've started to think about incentive design and the use of tokens, but if someone out there asks you what mechanism design you came up with, you want to be able to succinctly say it in probably less than 30 seconds. So you're going to need to figure out how do you actually capture the essence of that mechanism design and describe it. And this is a particularly hard thing to do. One of the things that we really take from UX is it is totally on purpose that we have all of this information on one sheet. Yeah, it forces us to constantly simplify and really capture just the essence of the idea or concept rather than cluttering it up with all of these other ideas. So that's an important part. So in this, the instructions for you guys next is to create one sentence. You can use kind of a story flow kind of format if you want. And if you did come up with a token, come up with a memorable name for the token in that little area to fill out there. All right, cool, go for it.
Don't have to add a token. How would you describe it? I said, oh, what is your mechanism design? Catchphrase.
bring the third parties to
How about it's like, how about people show up?
You can submit a report that says that they get something that they are not able to do, they are and she has to say that. So I just ended up asking Garrett whatever I was stuck there and I'm like, oh, half hours are not equal to together. That might have changed there will have to be some kind of
setup, we will not choose one with tokens because you know they will just pay you for the tokens and you won't get any paid. And then next time you can do an unfair cut and you get something back. Yeah, but why would you engage in a game with someone who has tokens then? Because you know you can just like there are no chance that you can get cake. Yeah, but then you have
Okay, so some people finished, some people didn't finish. Some people came up with some really interesting and complex incentive design and use of tokens, which I hadn't seen before, which is super cool. And then some people were still figuring out which mechanism design do we want. So look, the whole reason why we have it all on the sheet of paper and use grey lead pencil that has an eraser on it is so you can iterate a lot. yeah, because it's a hard thing to hold all of that space in your head at once. So that was the cake. So the cake's pretty simple in comparison to most of the other concepts that we're trying to do mechanism design around. And so we're going to give you the opportunity, if you flip over your worksheets, you'll see that, so with the cake example, we essentially pre-filled a lot of those fields. But in this example, you guys are going to choose your own concept as a table, and then you're going to start from the blank canvas, so to speak. So, we start again. We start. Yes, you'll get to it, don't worry. We have time. You'll start with the top section, which is about the system, and this is where we look at the actors. This is where we look at the actors and the system goals. But the first thing before we dive into that is, as a team, I want you guys to very quickly choose a concept. Yeah, choose a concept that you're going to center around. So you might have already, you might have one in mind that you'd like to kind of play out with the group, or if you're really stuck for examples, so we just came up with 3 things that might be good starting points. So maybe like a voting system of some sort, a reward system, or maybe a stable point. So they're just some examples, but if you have your own concept, that'd be really good to choose. We had a question over here?
Just clarified.
Okay, cool. All right, so we'll give you, again, a few minutes to come up with a concept. It's not important that it's like the best concept in the world. It's one that you can actually start to use and simulate and design for. Cool.
Maybe we can try to make a tokenized viewer or something like service figures. Try to get something So the goal is like deliver the service the fastest there will be like service makers and service engineers. Like the personnel are pretty simple to make.
I'm going to give you 30 more seconds to come up with the concept.
Yeah, we can have some. And his goal is like, I want to learn from the
Don't need to overanalyze or debate this part. It's just a kind of scaffolding for the rest of it. Okay, now you're going to move on to the rest of the parts in this section. So we have the actors and then system goals. System goals super important because that's what we're going to refer back to when we're assessing the different mechanism designs, just like we did with the cake. So that system goal was equal distribution of the cake. So your instructions are identify the actors and fill out the persona details. So we've got Alice and Bob already pre-filled in there, but you can have up to 4 actors. And what I want you to do is figure out what's their role in this ecosystem and what's a quote that kind of personifies that actor. Then you're going to move on to what is it, the centerpiece. So in the previous example, the cake was the thing as the centerpiece. Then you can write up the system goals and then the actions that the various actors take in the system. And don't worry too much about getting all of that stuff perfect because you can kind of constantly revisit it as you start to explore the mechanism designs. All right, so get started on filling out that top section, section 1.
So Alice and Bob just want to be part of
Like, do we need the neutral guy?
Yeah, like the validate.
Yeah, so like
that's a much harder.
it's against personal to respect it.
So what are our
Sharks is the one that makes the what's his consent?
She would have to be the process she always has to make her job is no true. So it's like they all want to speed. They only have so many days to speed. They get a couple of rounds of speed. Right, exactly. Just blow everything up. Yeah, right. Our system will only work if you're using rapid tokens. It's all by 10,000 per page. All the same exchange.
So what if we were to maybe like what's that now?
Okay, so now that you've kind of looked at what are the goals of the system, who are the different people involved, we're going to move into mechanism design options. So you're going to craft them for your concept. Okay, so we have found that it's hard to come up with all of the mechanism designs at once, and you'll see like a lot of this technique is about getting one thing working and then moving on to the next. So kind of increment through it. So before you start to do all of the mechanism designs, maybe start with how does it work today? And then allocate like who in the ecosystem is doing those different actions. Just articulate that in the table in section 2. Once you've done that, then you're going to get into character again. So you're each going to figure out who in that ecosystem you're going to play out as actors. Then you're going to simulate it, and just like we did in the cake example, you're going to write some insights and see, did it meet the system goal? What were some of the highs and lows in that journey? Was there anything kind of left over that we felt wasn't really managed or dealt with by that mechanism? Cool. All right, go for it.
Bob is the buyer, Patrick is the
Satisfaction. So maybe we're basically the amount of
Essentially, that's how it works. But if we keep it simple, yeah, exactly. So it's so basically
So Alice, like, she can accept that's one action. Maybe
Bob
she
has
can.
right, yeah. So this is
Okay, hopefully you've at least figured out the current mechanism design. Hopefully you've at least figured out the current mechanism design. Some people have figured that out and simulated it, so we'll move on to the next bit, which, I mean, we're doing a playthrough of what we did for the cake example, so if you've already finished the first one, go on and design what would the future look like. So you can think of 2 different mechanism design options for this, and then again, that methodical approach of simulate one, capture the insights, did it meet the goal, was there anything else that you wanted to capture, and then move on to the third one. So continue with that.
What happens if
now I'm waiting for
What's good for
I see a way of not paying.
so maybe to say
They both look the sign. So how about
like delivery guy, and I will like give you the package and you can
there you go. So it's a double signature. So Alice takes the show delivered the package and Bob gets the package. He signs.
better sign.
Maybe Alice takes half the value of the bike
It's like she's buying having a commitment, like saying you and what is that's stuff there's so much downside. It's the delivery price is fixed, but Bob is asked for slashing, and the bigger slashing he asks for, if Alice accepts, it's because she's more responsive, more traditional.
Well, it's kind of like the package has value. It's somewhat so the package is Alice who put X in a wallet. The package never should have Bob puts X in a wallet.
Before accepting as a deliverer, how are you going
It's like insurance. When you mail something, you get an automatic insurance. You say, well, what about it? Yeah, I know, that's what we're talking about. But it's a proof of stake. Well, it's working at the incentive so that they interject it.
Yeah, that's what I think the reason
But this is well, but this is pretty simple. I know it's an illusion, but the cheap will Bob is
what I'm saying about that.
and it's the thing with the case is that the king and the two actors are all right. Decision can be made. This is the timeline of some kind of all sorts of stuff can go wrong. Alice has a tough time.
If Bob says this package she arrives and she takes it and she thinks it's 150, like she would just take it. So she, like, they are incentivized for Bob is incentivized to say the right value of it.
Right, like if there was a reputation so if we have reputation if there's a stake in reputation. So she stakes short time. We have a really good reputation. Pretty much trust what you But is that a
satisfactory?
Bob. So then she would also just operate. The system. Everything's Bob and see how the system actually see how much delivery, and he would say, oh, well, his reputation is 5 stars, and stay same amount by the question is a reputation can be enhanced?
I don't think it's not
They could sign a transaction. It's like it was delivered at the time. And then Bob would say what the time was. And then people people can do the math on distance. If there was location law, they would know distance travel that we have to have. Future customers can figure out
Well, let's play this back. Say Bob Boy wants one. Gives it a great position, fast, like,
yeah, I think if there's enough information to capture, then other people
So some groups have moved on to incentive and tokens, but I'm tipping that they know what to do with that if they do. So just make sure if you're thinking about tokens or incentives, you put them in there.
that's all I got.
What if you are a user, like your reputation, but you want to buy something of very good value? I think that would be a problem because at least anyone can stake high value, but she doesn't want to
Bob has to build up his reputation.
What's the concept?
So the concept is Bob wants to buy something and Annie wants to deliver it.
Well, the game goal is Bob is to use product.
So maybe it helps to have like a product. Yeah, like maybe think of a product just to like bring it to life a bit. Because sometimes it's hard, like you have two different components all together. You know, so it could be like a pair of shoes or yeah, watermelon, perfect. You know, so you draw a watermelon in the middle and it helps kind of anchor it. So it's really easy to act it out, play it out, but it's specific.
Who can draw a
That is watermelon. It's a round So these are like low value items. That's a good thing to catch big days. You know, or it calculated. Yeah. So that's like Bob wants a watermelon. Alice wants a watermelon. That shirt's in the I still think it's homemade watermelon. It's like free range, gluten-free. It's like super hydration. Okay. So we have two actors. We Well, let's work through these. So if they both tell the truth, right? They both want one, right? Then Bob takes some watermelon. Let's say well, we can assume somebody should be one. So
You guys are doing amazing. I'm loving all of the ideas that are coming up. It's really cool. You probably know we're not going to get to all of the detail. Hands up in the air. Shh. Thanks. We're not going to get to all of the detail today, but what I want you to do is spend this last bit of time on summarizing the concept that you came up with. Yeah, so remember something that if someone comes up to your table and wants to find out what your future mechanism design looks like, or even if you only just got to your current one, try and describe it in one sentence. And if you did have a token, put that token name in there as well. So this is in this summary section, section 5 up the top here.
And then the token can be used to incentivize some sort of if we pay for it's but like the token is needed because it's the first scenario Alice should be incentivized to actually deliver, and the second Robin should be incentivized to actually pay, and the third one they should be incentivized to sign at the end.
So the first one is pays when he gets the thing?
Before he gets the thing, and then they should both agree to make the transaction. Does it bring something?
Yeah, definitely, because it's finally changing something very fast.
Yeah, exactly. I like that. He's asking me to meet with you, like, Yeah, so it seems like there's a variation of the scenario. Because if Alice engaged, she's going to say, here, here's some payment point, I promise you delivery. And then Bob gets the watermelon, and he's got to give back this point.
So there will be systems where you can
It's really good. Well, they could be maybe Bob. If you really want to make it complicated, the third party, Bob wants Alice to deliver a word on it.
We can do 1,000 now. So that's possible.
So you guys are doing the summary? How you describe it to a human being?
So which one?
Then you have
Which
That's the whole point of all this, right? We're just giving them ideas for ICO. That's all. Exit scams. Exit scams. Alright, so anyway,
I don't feel we need a job.
let's write it down. What's our elevator speech?
Which final science what is the one where she delivers the copy?
Yeah, that's what
but again, how we do it is
so Alice promises to really water Bob gets the water and says,
then think about each case as
How does it work in a job? Like, how can you promise that you will pay when something is going to make sure that
it's escrow. Yeah, it's very simple. Because, so if Alice escrows she gets escrow.
so that's that. Then the next step after you exam was solved, the agency
Bob can say, yes, I got my watermelon.
if you're entering the realm of token,
Just write on your real big.
you're a watermelon.
I mean, if we want to have fun with it, it's like watermelon something, right? So when Alice picks up the watermelon, she has that watermelon. She puts watermelon tokens
So it's kind of just the price of the token is based on the
She's actually backed by it's hard back. Well, here, let's start with what are you running? What are we doing? Let's start with which is, there's a real knowledge. We'll call it rap.
MLN class. MLN class.
Promise.
Alright, I'm going to give you 30 more seconds to write something in that summary box. And then you can relax. And then I'll start talking. everyone. Attention back at the front of the room.
I think she teaches kindergarten as well.
Okay. So, Naz and I, we wanted to design a game, design a workshop for you guys, and our goal was to make it easier to understand mechanism design and UX. So just like you guys are going through here, we had a lot of cake design considerations to take into account, and this is just our kind of fun kind of process that we went through in Prague, trying to find just the right cake for you guys. So this is our list of things that we were looking for in just the right cake. So ease of cutting the cake, that was super important, as well as ease of eating the cake. Some cakes are difficult to kind of pick up. Flavor popularity. Chocolate is really popular with people. We wanted, for people who got to actually demonstrate fractionalization of cake and cut it into smaller and smaller bits, we wanted a cake that would allow you to demonstrate that, as well as fungibility. But most important of all was that the cake needed to be small enough, so it's low fidelity, kind of prototype, to encourage you to experiment. If we had a big piece of cake, you probably would have felt like, oh, I don't want to waste the cake, and therefore I don't want to keep trying this out. So these are kind of concepts to take forward when you're thinking about prototyping and actually simulating this out. And although we've been talking a lot about design and simulation of mechanism, I just want to kind of move on to how do you implement this. So when we add UX to mechanism design, it gives us a whole bunch of complexity to think about and manage. And when we try to implement that all at once in a multi-actor ecosystem, it's just a lot to take on. So in terms of like how would we actually launch, how would we deploy, and how do we approach that, we tend to focus on who is the first actor that we need to onboard. And so in the peer-to-peer cake example, if you think about Alice, she was the one that needs to cut the cake first before Bob allocates the slices. So we would focus and hone in on creating a really good user experience designed for Alice cutting the cake. Now, that's a good place to start. However, for that kind of ecosystem design, Alice and Bob's actions are quite tightly coupled. So we probably wouldn't be able to go to an MVP without actually designing for Bob. So how do we approach that? Well, yes, we would design for Alice first, but we might get 1 to 2 people that can be Alice and we can actually implement with them. And we might get 1 to 2 people that can be Bob and implement with them, and design a two-sided ecosystem in the beginning and then get that working well before we add more actors, more complexity, or scale up. And this is really important to us because this technique is at the core of how we've built our platform, Flightplan. So the platform we've built and the experiences are all designed around a lot of this kind of practice and where to start. So we're really keen to, I mean, it's just such a great thing to see all of you really getting into it and see how you use this technique. But we'd really like some feedback from you guys so we can help improve our product. So I've put some post-it notes on the tables, and I've got one more exercise for you, which is if you can let us know what did you find useful, how might we improve it, and if you do want to get involved, leave your details so we can get in touch. So I'll give you maybe 5 minutes to do that. And then after that, I think if people, we've still got a little bit of time, if people, probably makes sense, like if people wanted to kind of surf around the tables and maybe see what others did. I mean, Naz and I got to do that, and that was kind of cool. But you guys might want to see, you know, what concepts did people come up with as well. So if you want to get in touch with us, these are our details here. And yeah, thank you again.